Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today for my session about the fundamentals of email list hygiene. I'm Keith Reinhardt, and I'm the marketing manager here at FreshAddress. For those of you who aren't familiar with FreshAddress, we're a leading provider of proprietary data-driven email solutions for digital marketers. We've been in business for over 20 years, and in that time, we've served over 2,500 clients, including most of the Fortune 100. We processed over 17 billion email addresses since our inception, and our solutions are all designed to help our clients clean, protect, and grow their email lists. And this helps them avoid deliverability issues and helps them drive more revenue and ROI through their email program. So a quick look at the agenda. First, we're going to kind of take a quick look at the world we live in from the standpoint of email. We're going to look at some of the threats to your email marketing ROI. We're going to look at some of the costs associated with not focusing on email list hygiene and email data quality. And we're going to identify a few quick solutions to some of your problems. So just a really high level look at the world that we live in. You probably wouldn't be here if you weren't a fan of email. Everybody sees these statistics, a $42 ROI for every dollar spent in email. It's become even more powerful over the past year when a lot of businesses were closed and lost physical touch with their customers. But you need to do it right, and there's some steps you need to take to ensure that you're getting that big return on your email efforts. Again, we love email because it engages the people you know who know you anytime you want with whatever message you want. It's really the lowest hanging fruit for impacting marketing engagement. And it only works if your message reaches the inbox. So you can have the best strategy in place, the best design, the best creative, the best segmentation, personalization. But if your message isn't landing in your subscriber's inbox, it's kind of all for naught. And there are three real big obstacles to inbox placement and email deliverability. Before I get into this, it's important to note that email list hygiene and quality is a major factor that contributes to inbox placement and deliverability. It's not the only one, but it's a major one. And when it comes to this facet of impacting inbox placement and deliverability, the three obstacles really are that number one, your email file is most likely corrupted to some extent. The new data you collect isn't always clean. We'll get into that a little bit in more depth in a moment, but anywhere that you're collecting email addresses is an opportunity for error, especially when human intervention plays in. And your clean data that's good today could be bad tomorrow. It has a short shelf life. People change their email addresses. Those are going to bounce. Domains go dormant. And unused emails can also turn into spam traps. More on that in a moment as well. And before we really delve into the threats associated with the bad stuff in your email list, I think it's always important to look at and define what a quality email address is. And I look at this kind of as a three-pronged thing. The first is that it's deliverable, so it doesn't bounce. It connects to an inbox. The next one is that it's accurate. It actually identifies and corresponds to your customer and your prospect. And the third is that it's a primary email address. It's deliverable. It corresponds to your customer prospect, and it's not their junk email address. It's not their second, third, fourth, fifth email address. I know some folks out there would maybe contend that you want the email address that your subscriber feels comfortable giving you, and I agree with that, but I also want my subscribers to trust me enough and desire my messaging enough to give me the email address that they're checking all the time. So it's a matter of preference, but still I want that primary address that someone's toggling through on their phone every 5 minutes or whatever we do these days. Now taking a look at the threats, there are a bunch of different flavors here. The first one that we're going to look at is the one that most folks are very, very aware of, and that's the undeliverable and invalid addresses. So there's many causes here. There's malformed addresses. There's those that are misspelled through keystroking errors. There's data handling issues. There's just nonsense typing. Fortunately, these are the ones that are really easy to ID and scrub out. Some folks can handle this to some extent with a DIY approach, probably not recommended as you get up into higher and higher volumes, but this is one that a lot of tools, that a lot of providers, that a lot of marketers can kind of fix to some extent. And again, you have these deliverable but typos. We see these on web forms. We see these in stores. We see these when folks are taking email addresses down with paper forms. There are just a ton of typo domains out there that are deliverable and pass email validation. So that what that means is you won't even know that you have a bad typo email address. You think you're mailing Keith, but you're mailing someone or something else, potentially a spam trap, something that's definitely not going to provide any value to you in your email program at best. There's also deliverable but bogus addresses. These are completely worthless to you, but they're also going to pass a simple validation. There's a couple examples here. We see some rather colorful and funny ones from time to time passing through, but again, bogus entries that add absolutely no value to your program. Then we get into deliverable again, but also disposable. So when a user doesn't want to give you their real email address, they'll turn to a disposable provider. There's a ton of these. If you search on Google, there's a virtually limitless number of disposable domain providers. And what we've seen over the past couple of years is, and this was in here somewhere, but it must have been overlooked, we saw somewhere around 120% rise in the disposable category between 2018 and 2020. And these are really just a lost opportunity to connect with a customer or a prospect. And it's really indicative of a bigger underlying problem for you as a marketer and for me as a marketer. If folks are giving me a disposable address for a piece of content, they don't want to hear from a sales rep. They don't trust me. The value hasn't been established yet. So the more of these that we see on our lists, the more we know that it's time to kind of zoom out and take a look at our email program and why this is happening. You know, things like insurance quotes, contests, things of that nature really tend to attract a whole bunch of disposable addresses. Then another deliverable but potentially not so great category, depending on your business, is a role account or a role-based email address. So this is info at, marketing at, sales at, abuse at. It depends on what your business is. If you're in the office supplies business, you might want an admin at. I think the downfall here, or the potential problem, is that more than one person is receiving this email. Somebody, 1 out of 10 people who monitor an info at email may have signed up. The other 9 didn't. They may report you as spam. And again, it's not as easy to personalize and deliver a one-to-one message to an account that's being monitored by potentially a variety of people. And there's also the potential that the 1 out of 10 employees at that info at email address that signed up for your list is now not there anymore, which is a whole other problem. And then kind of the worst of the worst, you have deliverable but spam traps. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with spam traps. They're deliverable email addresses used to ID spammers. They may look innocent, but they are not. If you hit the wrong one, you can run afoul, land on block lists, potentially be prevented from sending any email at all for a period of time. And I think a really important thing here is that absolutely getting blocklisted is not good. Hitting spam traps is not good. It's indicative of a lot of problems, but it doesn't mean that spam traps are inherently bad. They're not. They're a useful tool for marketers, especially legitimate marketers that aren't just kind of spamming the world. What they really do is they provide a nugget of information that allows you to go upstream, look at your collection points, and figure out where this stuff is coming from. Did you inherit a list that maybe you should have scrutinized more deeply? Is your lead gen vendor on point? Are you cleaning your data? So it's more of an opportunity than anything else from my perspective. And again, anything that's sent to a spam trap is considered spam. The bottom line, it's not just the undeliverable, invalid email addresses that pose a threat to your list in your email program. There's a whole slew of deliverable but problematic addresses that cause their, a varying set of problems. There's the typo addresses, the bogus addresses, disposables, role accounts, and spam traps. So you want to be able to keep a close eye on all those and monitor for any shifts in frequency that those are hitting your list. Now let's take a look at how the bad addresses actually get onto your list. And there's three major ways that I'll talk about here. One of them is through acquisition error, touched on that a moment ago. Also the fact that good addresses turn bad. And then there's just plain old poor list management practices. In terms of acquisition errors, some data that we've pulled from the historic stuff we have on tap here. There's big error rates, significant error rates associated with point of sale, website, call center. They vary by client, they vary by industry. They all have their own sets of problems and drawbacks. Point of sale, especially in store, can be a real crowded, noisy, fast-paced environment, ripe for failure there. Website, folks can kind of, fat finger if your form isn't set up to accept long email addresses. That can be an issue. There's just a lot that can happen on a website if you don't have the technology in place to understand and detect when a bad or incorrect email address is being entered. Call center, again, tough human intervention. Folks are on the phone, they're trying to type something really fast, they're writing a note down on paper. We see a good failure rate there as well. Looking at the fact that good email addresses turn bad, these healthy deliverable email addresses one day can become undeliverable, bouncing inactive. They can turn problematic. They can become a frequent complainer. They can get on the FCC wireless list. And then the worst case scenario is they become a spam trap. And this is just kind of a quick timeline of how this can happen. Client has a good email address in the summertime, turns into a spam trap by November. By December, probably the worst time of year for most businesses, the client is blacklisted and needs to work with an anti-spam organization before they can ramp back up their email program. Nobody wants that around the holidays. And again, one spam trap hit at an influential provider can bring your inbox placement down significantly. It's just a problem that nobody really wants to deal with. So some common mistakes that we see folks make through poor list management is you inherit the old acquisition practices of previous marketers. So you inherit these lists. Sometimes we often feel pressure to drive more revenue through email, improve our reach. Sometimes we focus on quantity more than quality. That can be a big problem. The older the list, the higher the likelihood there's going to be dead and dangerous stuff in there that poses a problem. Sometimes there's suppression and bounce list management issues. I know in the past when we've migrated from one ESP to another, we thought we were suppressing all the bounce and suppression files, and that wasn't always the case. That can be an issue. Waiting a long time without emailing can be an issue. People forgot why they signed up. They forgot who you are and the value you deliver. And then another big one is no routine list hygiene, just kind of flying blind, emailing, not monitoring your list, not removing bouncing and inactives, not taking a look at spam traps, problematics, any of the bogus stuff that I talked about before, and just continuing to email over and over with no regard for data hygiene or quality. And the bottom line here is really that the email addresses that you have in your list that are undeliverable are worthless, and to some extent they cost you money. You're sending to addresses that are bouncing, that are undeliverable, and bad email addresses are even worse, right? They hurt your bottom line. These typo, bogus, disposable, role account, spam trap addresses, they can really mess up your metrics, run you afoul of anti-spam organizations. They can really, really set you back. They can really prevent you not only from reaching that subscriber, but from reaching other subscribers and honoring your commitment as a vendor, a retailer, a trusted brand and voice. And I touched on this briefly. Let's take a look at the cost of having bad email addresses in your database. On a really high level, they're going to skew and mess up your metrics. They're going to have a negative impact on your deliverability and inbox placement. They're going to force you to spend money unnecessarily. They're going to lead to low customer satisfaction, and potentially they're going to lead to block listing issues. So in terms of skewed metrics, this bad stuff is going to lead to lower engagement rates. You're going to have a higher unsubscribe rate, bounce rate, and complaint rate. Nobody wants this, and it's just something with just a little bit of effort that can be fixed. They're going to have a negative impact on delivery. Like we said, deliverable doesn't always equal safe to send. Just because it connects to an inbox doesn't mean that you want to make that connection. Again, the deliverable and unengaged addresses hinder your access to the inbox. Inbox providers are always looking at engagement data, and yours is going to be worse and worse if you have a high portion of unengaged addresses in your list. And then lower engagement equals less ability to avoid the junk folder, and also complaints can be a factor here. A little bit more on spending. So the way I look at it is there's a cost associated with every email address on your list. You likely get billed based on the size of your list with your ESP and the number of emails you send. I know as when you start to look at new ESPs, new automation platforms, that number of marketing addressable contacts always tends to factor into the price. So you want to be really sure that every email address you're paying for corresponds to a real subscriber. And again, acquisition sources charge you on a per email basis. So if you're running lead gen campaigns, you're working with external vendors, you're spending $10, $20, $40, $50, $500 a lead or whatever it is, you're wasting money there if you don't have a proper protocol in place for making sure that email address that they're giving you is 100% safe and deliverable. There's also low customer satisfaction, especially in the retail space, but I guess anywhere, whatever your business is, it's almost like an unwritten contract with your subscriber. They're trusting you. They're giving you their email address. They have a level of expectation. They want the communications and information that they think that you'll deliver. In the retail world, they want receipts. They want discounts. They want offers. And when they don't receive those things and they expect them, they get annoyed. They can complain via social media. They can add reviews. They can contact your call center, which is typically an expensive venture. And I guess the worst case scenario is they just get fed up and leave you for a competitor. And this can all be circumvented to some extent by just capturing a clean, deliverable, good email address that corresponds to your subscriber and customer at the point of capture. And the big one, again, it's blocking. That's the term that we, blocking and block listing is the term that we use now. You could get kicked off your ESP. You could lose your ability to send any email. Like we said, there's varying degrees of severity for running afoul of some of these block listing organizations. And I think the good thing to remember here is that if you're a legitimate email marketer, everybody makes mistakes. They will typically work with you to amend the problem. And again, there's ways that things you can leverage to go upstream and identify problems and get unblocked. If you're really being abusive and spamming the world, shame on you. That's going to lead to a whole other slew of problems that we won't even get into right now. So we talked about a bunch of threats. We thoroughly scared you with the costs associated with not focusing on email address quality. Now it's a good time to get into some of the positive stuff. Let's look at a couple solutions. And our 4 big tips for today are to screen everything, to improve your acquisition practices, to develop a quality standard, and to not be afraid to ask for help. So the first solution suggestion is to screen everything. It doesn't matter, again, if it's your point of sale system, if it's your website, if it's your call center. You want to make sure that every point of entry is audited and fortified, so you can become aware rapidly of bad email addresses trying to make their way into your ecosystem. Another suggestion in terms of improving acquisition practices is that there's technology that you can use. There's solutions at your disposal that can help you identify bad email addresses before that stuff gets into your database and causes problems. Another important thing to consider is to optimize the keystroking process. So if you're doing it manually, the Uno's example on the left is much easier than the one on the right, the paper. So you want to give folks enough room. You want to give them the opportunity to give you a legible email address and contact information. And that goes for any form of collection. Another tip is to develop a quality standard and to really stick to it. No matter how sharp you are, how good of an email marketer you are, how much you focus on email address quality, all lists are at risk to some extent. You really want to take the steps as a marketer to make it impossible for your company to make a mistake. And you need to have a really bulletproof strategy. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of prevention to keep things moving in the right direction. And the way you develop a quality standard, it doesn't have to be super, super complex, but you just have to have something that makes sense to your organization. You want to come up with your own internal definition of a good email address, and then you want to implement screening organization-wide. Always want to think quality over quantity. Some folks disagree with me there, but it will bite you in the long run if you don't focus on quality first. And again, it gets into the role account email addresses I talked to you before. Some businesses that those are good for, and some they aren't. So again, it's really dependent on your organization and your preferences. And as part of this quality standard, like it says here, stay paranoid and trust no one. It doesn't mean if it's your lead gen vendor. It doesn't matter if it's your leadership team, any source of data, your auto dealership, anything that's anywhere that you're collecting email addresses, you need to scrutinize. You can't afford to grant somebody the luxury of a free pass. Just whatever processes you have in place, apply them to every single email address that you collect, because you never know what, one bad apple can spoil the bunch, so to speak. And that's very true when it comes to email marketing. And then finally, ask for help. ESP list cleaning alone doesn't equal proper email hygiene. Most ESPs are going to filter out and remove some of your bounces. We've equated that, or I've heard that equated in the past to, vacuuming your carpet and thinking it's clean, and without doing the deep clean. Under the surface, there's a whole lot of bad stuff that can cause problems for you. The junk addresses will remain. ESPs aren't going to filter out the problematic, the spam trap, the real bad stuff. There's just too many of these bad email addresses for your ESP to remove, for you to remove on a DIY basis. It's a full-time job. And that's part of what we do here. We've got a team of folks who their sole purpose is to fingerprint and identify spam traps and spam trap domains, disposable domains. So very, very difficult unless that's you want that to be your job from now until eternity. And there are also free tools at your disposal. We offer one. It's called Free List Check, freelistcheck.com. It's just a high-level scan. It's going to tell you if you have, dead, dangerous email addresses, if you have a problem with invalids and bounces, spam traps, boguses, disposables. It's going to give you an estimate of the number of invalids in your list. And it's just a high-level indicator of whether there's problems and if you need to dig a little bit deeper into what those problems are. And again, maybe work with a partner to identify the source of these bad addresses, go upstream and fix some issues. That's really all I have today. Again, Keith from FreshAddress. If you want more information, you can visit our website, read our blog, subscribe to our monthly newsletter, or follow us on Twitter at FreshAddress. Thanks everybody very much for your time. Again, feel free to reach out to me for anything, for any information related to this session or anything else we do here.